Okay, မင်္ဂလာပါခင်ဗျာကျွန်တော်တို့ DVB တွေ့ဆုံမေးမြန်းခန်းအစီအစဉ်မှာကြိုဆိုပါရစေဒီနေ့ကျွန်တော်တို့တွေ့ဆုံမေးမြန်းမှာတော့ဗမာပြည်ရဲ့ ILO liaison official state marshal ဖြစ်ပါတယ်နော် Okay, welcome to the program. Thanks for allowing your time. I'd like to ask one specific question. Your role as a liaison officer in Myanmar is two particular issues. One is about elimination or systematic use of forced labor and also use of child soldier. And you are given your report in November, forthcoming November at the ILO conference. Please tell us what is the latest situation and is there anything done what need to be improved, particularly in this country at this moment?
Okay, yes, you're very right. The ILO core activities since 2007 has been about the elimination of the systematic use of forced labour. And yes, that does include the use of underage recruits, but it covers things like human trafficking for forced labour, forced domestic workers, a range of different activities. Actually, our workload has expanded, right? But that is still a core area of focus. And in November of this year, I am required to submit to the governing body of the ILO a report on the progress that has been made for the elimination of this activity. In 2012, the government of Myanmar signed an MOU which essentially committed to working with us and with broader society towards the elimination of the systematic use of forced labour by the end of 2015. That's pretty close.
That is the target.
That's the target, and that's fairly close. We have been reporting on that and working with the government, and good progress has been made. There is no question that actually the actual use of the traditional forced labour has reduced. In the context of the military's responses have been very positive, and they have passed new rules and orders, and the military use of forced labour has reduced. It has, however, not finished. Right? We still have work to do together. And in November, working with the government, I will be reporting on the progress that is made and the areas where we think work still needs to be done. In March of this year, again, I briefed the government fully on it. We saw the issues as being a continuation of public awareness and empowerment, that people actually knew what their rights were. That is very important, that people understand that forced labour is not legal. Right? But also in terms of the application of the law, that people who break the law must be held to account. And yes, I have to say the Tatmadaw have been very strong on accountability, and they have been prosecuting military personnel for the use of forced labour. In respect of the civilian authorities and the private sector, we still need to see progress in that area of the application of the law. So really the emphasis is on awareness, of training of people with authority, an understanding of the law and the application of the law.
It is very wide range. What do you think it is realistic that the in 2015 target will be fulfilled?
I think firstly we have to be very practical. Forced labour is not just a problem for Myanmar. Right? Most countries in the world do have the situation where largely employers in the private sector break the rules and break the law, but not on a systematic basis. And the problem that we experienced in Myanmar was that actually this was forced labour that was systematic, and in those days was applied actually by the government of the day.
Once you go Burma, modern found no slavery because of this systematic
Correct.
use.
But so That is why we say the elimination of the systematic use. Right? We understand that actually there will still be bad people who will still do bad things. But it's got to be clear in everybody's mind that this is not something that is seen as acceptable. It is not something which citizens need to simply accept. It was our hope that actually by the end of 2015 we would have clear evidence that this had been achieved. One of the difficulties, of course, is that forced labour goes hand in hand with the issue of armed conflict. And the issues around the border areas, for example, we note that the situation continues to be slightly worse in the border areas than it is in central Myanmar. So there is still work to be done. I will make my report, and the good thing in November is that the government will also make a report. And the government report, we hope, will be outlining their plan and their commitment for addressing this issue on a continuing basis. And on that way, the objective is that we will be in a position to normalise full relationships with the government, which means that eventually, I don't know when, but at some stage, this office will stop being a liaison office and would become a proper, normal country office.
Okay, move to this particular forced labor and child soldier issue to another issue of applying proper international labor law practice that you've been helping. What is the status of the current government, respond to the particular labor law with the international standards?
Okay. Well, as you know, when the government came into office in 2011, the legislative framework was very weak. Very weak. A lot of the law was based on the old colonial structures and was completely irrelevant for a modern, open society. And frankly, the government has moved very quickly and should be given credit for the change. However, what we are facing is that this is a huge, huge amount of work. This is not something that is going to change overnight. But the government, in some key areas, and you would have seen it in terms of the labour organisation law, the dispute settlement law, they're currently revising the Factories Act, we're working with them on the child labour laws, a whole range of fundamental laws are being very rapidly updated. Right? But what the government also understands is that the structure of the law is not right. And so we have agreed, and we're working with others, with the United States, with Denmark, with Japan, the government and ourselves, working towards completely revising the labour law structure. But having the law is good, but you then have to apply it. And that is a different issue. That raises the issue of institutional capacity. We give the right to strike. Do we have good mediation, arbitration and conciliation services to support disputes, to stop the need for strikes, to actually have people to foster collective bargaining and social dialogue? The factory inspectorate, it has the role to apply the law. Have they got sufficient resources? Are there enough of them? Do they understand the law? So the institutional capacity building is also a major priority, to have the law and then to support the application of the law.
But in reality, there were lots of factory workers who've been struck, as you mentioned, right to strike. They've been thrown behind bars and charged with other penal code, not with their practicing. Authority don't see that they are practicing their right. Very simply asking for better working condition and better pay, but they've been thrown out. Then who will be responsible to realize these practices are allowed and this is their rights to strikes. Who is responsible for making realize this good law into practice?
Yeah, okay. You're right, there have been industrial disputes, there have been strikes. I have to say that there is some problem actually in both employer and workers in understanding and coming to grips with the necessary approach to resolve their problems. Strike should be the last thing. The first thing should be talking to each other and negotiating. And I think some of what we're seeing is a transitional problem in that we do not have developed collective bargaining. We do not have developed structures where employer and the employees sit down and talk to each other. But you are right, people do have a right to strike under the law, and that law provides procedures for exercising that right to strike. And that should be that there is prior discussion, etc., that there's negotiation to try and resolve the issues, that the parties look at using mediation services to try and resolve their disputes. But eventually, if they cannot agree, then they have the right to go on strike. Right? But when you are striking, you also have responsibilities, right? And that is that you can strike within the framework of the law. To go on strike and the right to strike does not mean that that gives you a right to break other laws. Right? So it's important that people understand that with every right we have, there is a corresponding responsibility. The particular issue that you raise, yes, is a concern. And I think there is, at the moment, a contradiction between two different laws. Right? The labour laws give workers the right to strike, and they give employers the right to lock their workers out. All right? So that's under the labour laws as part of that process. Now, it also lays down that if you do exercise your right to strike, then you are able to protest, but there are some rules about that protest. You cannot break other laws. You cannot go within and try and block off a government building or a school or a military camp or something of this nature. You need to do it in a responsible way, okay? But that right is under the labour laws. The peaceful assembly laws cover other disputes. And our understanding is that they cover civil disputes, not labour disputes. Right? And so there seems to be a contradiction in the application of the laws, that if workers are on legitimate strike on a labour dispute, then we would understand that probably the peaceful assembly law should not apply. And this was the understanding that we actually received from the government. And so it's really important that we, as part of the transition, people understand that their actions are governed by different elements of law. So, and I don't know the detail of those particular cases, but we do know that there seems to be some misunderstandings and some contradiction between the way in which you deal with civil protest as opposed to the legitimate labour protest under the labour laws.
You are quite right, and at the moment, most of the strikes are also related to their minimum wage. Because the wage being very low at the moment, then what most of the strikers, the labour, they are simply asking, better condition and also the increase of their wage. But the response is that locking up, then that is also not the answer. So we know that 2 days ago, Labour Minister saying that there should be another minimum wage standard in this country, and both if employer and Labour decline to do, government were intervene, and they were determine what should minimum wage. They've been having a parliamentary committee since 2013, but it's a kind of deadlock. What do you suggest, because these are also related to some of the worker strikes. What do you suggest about this particular minimum wage issued in this country at this moment?
Okay.
If they
Well, the
decline-
reality is that actually government does have a responsibility in the establishment of the minimum wage. It is preferable to do as the government have done. They have established a national tripartite committee in the hope that that committee will come out, negotiate, look at good research, and come out with a recommendation which would then be applied by regulation. That's the way it works. If the parties cannot agree, then the government probably have a responsibility to make a decision.
Yeah.
But it is very, very important, frankly, and it is very understandable that this has taken a long time, because the minimum wage has a big impact on the society and on the economy. So it is really important that actually the parties identify a level which is a protection for people to allow them to have an income with dignity, for life with dignity, but not life with luxury, right? But at a level which also allows employers to be productive, to be competitive, and to create more jobs.
Okay, final message. Any message for this coming May Day for those workers in Myanmar in general?
Well, I think firstly, it is wonderful that we are in a position to be able to celebrate May Day. You're aware that there's been problems, and with the new government now, with the freedom to actually celebrate May Day is a major achievement. I think we do need to say that the workers' position, the rights have improved. There is still a long way to go. It is very important that employers and workers understand that they need each other, and that actually the collective workers can be a very good benefit for the employers in terms of their ability to compete in the global market. Building a relationship based on cooperation, not on conflict, is absolutely critical. And so I think this May Day, if we can use this May Day for employers and workers to continue that development and an understanding of the need for cooperation, that would be excellent.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.